The nurse. A girl had just finished nursing school and started working in a new hospital. Although she loved her job as a nurse, she found it difficult to get along with the people she worked with. They were mostly young doctors who had just finished medical school. The problem was that they delighted in pulling pranks on each other. She found it very difficult to live with them in the residence next to the hospital, because they stayed up late at night and made too much noise. The nurse worked very long hours and needed all the sleep she could get. Whenever she complained about their behavior, the mischievous doctors just laughed in her face and told her to shut her fat mouth. The nurse eventually had to report the young doctors to the hospital manager, and they got in all sorts of trouble. The doctors began to really hate the nurse and spent days devising a plan to get revenge on her. Finally, one of the doctors came up with a really sick prank they could play on the nurse, and the others gleefully agreed to help. That night, they broke into the mortuary in the hospital basement and sawed the arm off a corpse. Then they sneaked into the nurse's bedroom and put the severed arm under her bedclothes. They placed it at the bottom of the bed so that when she lay down, her feet would touch it. Chuckling to themselves, they stood around in the hallway, waiting for the young nurse to go to bed. As the girl went into her bedroom, the doctors had to stop themselves from laughing out loud. The nurse was suspicious of their behavior, but she was too tired to care and went into her bedroom, closing the door behind her. The men waited impatiently in the hallway for the nurse to find the severed arm in her bed. But nothing happened. There were no screams, no angry yells. Only silence. After a while, the doctors got fed up waiting around and decided to turn in for the night. They assumed that they had placed the severed arm too far down in the bed and the nurse must not have felt it. The next morning, when they woke up, the doctors went to check on the nurse. Receiving no answer when they knocked on her door, they turned the handle and went inside. The room seemed to be completely empty. The doctors searched the nurse's bedroom, and when they opened her closet, they were greeted by a horrible sight. The nurse was curled up in the corner of the closet. Her hair had turned completely white, her eyes were rolled back in her head, and she had gone totally insane. Her face looked like it had aged 20 years and, worst of all, she was chewing on the severed arm. The Sickle. A married couple lived in a small house in Japan with their son and daughter. The son was very angry with his sister and wanted to play a really nasty prank on her. He decided that he would secretly videotape her on the toilet and then post the video online. He wanted to humiliate his sister in front of her friends. The boy hid a video camera under a towel in the bathroom. Minutes later, his sister went to the bathroom and locked the door behind her. She never came out again. Her mother started to wonder what was taking her daughter so long. She banged on the bathroom door and called out the girl's name, but got no reply. Worried, she told her husband, and eventually, they managed to force the door open. What they found inside the bathroom filled them with horror. Their daughter was lying in a pool of blood on the tiled floor. She had been stabbed to death. Her face was so sliced up that she was unrecognizable, and her tongue had been cut off. There was a bloody sickle lying on the floor beside her. The police were called immediately and they came to investigate the scene. Inspecting the bathroom, they found that it posed a mystery. The door had been locked from the inside, the window was securely latched, and the bathroom was so small that nobody could have been hiding inside, lying in wait for the girl. So how was she murdered? The police saw that the only possible entrance was a small vent in the wall that measured only 10 inches by 10 inches. Nobody could have fit through such a small space. The police were absolutely stumped. They could not figure out how anyone would have gotten inside to kill the girl. The police carefully dusted the Sickle for fingerprints, but unfortunately, they found none. At this point, they felt that the case would never be solved. They questioned the mother and father, but when it came time to question the son, he was nowhere to be found. They searched the house and eventually found him curled up in a wardrobe. His eyes were wild and he was sobbing uncontrollably. His hands were shaking violently. They noticed that he was holding a video camera. Unable to question him, the police decided to review the videotape. What they saw in the footage would terrify them for years to come. They pressed play on the video camera and the screen showed the young girl sitting on the toilet. When she finished and stood up, the police noticed some movement in the small vent behind the toilet. A tiny figure emerged noiselessly from the vent. It was carrying a sickle. The policemen could hardly believe what they were seeing. The figure measured only 6 inches in height. It jumped onto the girl's back and before she had a chance to scream, it sliced open her throat with the sickle. Then it began stabbing the girl until she was dead. But the horror was not over. The tiny figure sliced up the girl's face and cut out her tongue. Afterwards, the figure approached the video camera. The figure's face was that of a gnarled and wrinkled old woman. It looked directly into the lens and hissed, "You're next." Then, the tiny figure disappeared back through the small vent, carrying the girl's severed tongue. After watching the videotape, the police officers wiped tears from their eyes. Some vomited on the floor and one even lost control of his faculties and pooped his pants out of sheer terror. Today, the case remains unsolved and the tiny woman has never been identified. The videotape still exists but the police refuse to release it to the public. It sits in an evidence locker at the police station. The police call this case the Sickle mystery and refuse to discuss it with the media. Click Clack. One day, a mother took her son and daughter shopping at the local mall. On their way home, they had to drive across the railroad tracks. While they were crossing the railroad tracks, the car got stuck and suddenly, they saw a train coming in the distance. The mother started freaking out and was still struggling to get off the tracks, when the train plowed straight into her car. Police were searching through the wreckage and found the dead bodies of the 2 children. They also came across the severed legs of an adult woman, but the mother's top half was never found. Shortly afterwards, a series of horrible murders occurred in the small town. All of the victims were children. In the schoolyards, rumors began to spread among the kids about a monster they called Click Clack. They said it was the ghost of a woman who had no legs. According to the story, she had really long fingernails and used them to drag herself around. Her name came from the click-clack sound her nails made as she was chasing you. The children warned each other to stay indoors after dark. According to the legend, Click-clack would stalk the streets after 6 p.m., looking for children to kill. When she caught them, she would tear them in half. Soon, every child in town knew the legend of Click Clack and made sure to lock all the doors and windows in their houses in the evening. One day, a girl was playing in the backyard, when her mother came out and told her to go to the shop and buy 3 bottles of milk. The girl went on the errand and carefully planned to get back home before 6 p.m. because she had heard that was the time when Click Clack came out. When she reached the local shop, the girl discovered that they were out of milk. She had to go to several shops before she could find 3 bottles of milk to buy. On the way home, the girl looked at her watch. The time was 5:52 p.m. She looked around and saw parents hurriedly calling their children indoors and nervously locking their windows and front doors. She started running and had almost reached her street, when she heard a strange noise. Click clack slide. Click click drag. Click clack slide. She turned around, but the street was empty. She increased her pace, but the strange noise seemed to follow her. Click clack drag. Click click slide. Click clack drag. She ran as fast as she could until she finally reached her house. She started pounding on the front door. The girl's mom had fallen asleep and the door was locked and the curtains were closed. All of a sudden, the pounding stopped. A few minutes later, the mother woke up and went to the front door. When she opened it, she looked down and screamed at the sight. Written in the doorstep in blood were the words, "Mom, why didn't you open the door?" The girl was never seen again.